Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. We have a wonderful guest for you today. She's coming to us from Brooklyn, New York. Her name is Alce Kaltman, and she is here to tell us about the tantalizing tale of Grace Minnaugh. Before Grace joins us, I want to let you know that we have a special series of episodes coming up on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. I've been telling you a little bit about it. They're called Solve It. And I'm creating these episodes with my buddy, our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson. I'm really excited. Solve It! These episodes are going to give kids and families a peek into the real world of scientists, engineers, and experts as they solve problems in their jobs using curiosity, critical thinking, and creativity. Now, this is the thing that I'm really excited about. These episodes of the Reading with Your Kids podcast are being produced specifically for parents and kids to listen to together. They are totally interactive. They come with a challenge at the end of every episode. You have to check it out. They are debuting May 19th here on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Be sure to check. I'm so excited I can't even say the word podcast. Be sure to stay tuned. You don't want to miss it. Solve It, coming to the Reading with Your Kids podcast in May. Joining us right now from Brooklyn and New York City, New York. She is the author of a great middle grade book called The Tantalizing Tale of Grace Minnaugh. Please welcome to the show, Alce Kaltman. Alce, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well, Jed, all things considered.
That's right. We are recording this on day 4 or 5 or 3 of the great quarantine of 2020. And we're keeping our social distance. We're kind of more than 6 feet apart here, connected through the magic of Skype. It's a challenging time for folks.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think it's such a challenging time and such a, in terms of, reading with your kids, what a better, I can't think of a better thing to be talking about right now with all these kids who are home. Parents and grandparents and caregivers scrambling for things to do with their kids. I mean, and just, talking about books and stories and things that can be shared and even educationally kind of valuable.
Yeah, and this is one of the things, my wife and I, we've been walking Augie the Wonder Dog here a couple of times a day, and I think we have to have, as a nation at some point when we come out on the other side of this, when we come out, we need to talk about, we could do things better, we can be better prepared. But one of the things I'm hoping is that families will sit down and say, I'm glad we're not quarantined anymore, but wow, that was really some fun time. I really enjoyed reading with you and talking about the books that we were reading and talking about the movies that we were watching together. And I really enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think the other hopefully silver lining of this is that because everyone is, sort of freaked out and scared, understandably scared, that people are connecting more. And I think families are feeling closer to each other in their, little pods. And there is so much more opportunity for exactly what you're saying. And I agree with you. I really hope that when we come out the other side of it, it doesn't all disappear, and that older kids don't disappear into their phones and parents don't disappear into their phones, and, the little kids are still engaged in kind of creative play the way they're going to be for the next, few months. I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about what we're going to experience when we disappear into the tantalizing tale of Grace Minnaugh.
Well, this is a fantasy book. It's a mermaid fantasy, and I guess what kind of makes it unusual is that it's about a young girl who's, has to move from the Midwest out to Southern California. She's a girl who's never been oceany or beachy in her life. In fact, she kind of has a phobia about going into the water, but without revealing too much about what happens in the book, she finds herself at one point, after a month or so of begrudgingly living by the beach in the ocean, almost drowns, but instead she finds herself transformed into a mermaid. And that sort of starts a whole series of events for her, which involve science experiments to figure out what's going on with her, sort of library research on different things she discovers under the water, and also just a kind of, there's shipwrecks, there's secrets, there's a wonderful relationship she has with an older woman who still lives back in Ohio that she kind of keeps up with through sending letters to. So there's a whole lot of stuff in this book. But it's also, I think for right now, what I appreciate about it is that, it's very much a kind of an escapist fantasy, which I think we could all use at the moment.
Yeah, it really is fun, kind of escaping into a fantasy world and letting our imaginations run wild. And you're right, when we're quarantined, as we are now, or if we're just kind of overwhelmed by the pressures of school or work, it's just so much fun diving into the book and just letting your imagination go wild.
Yeah. And I also love, one of the things I kind of, if anyone's listening and they're gonna pick up a copy of Grace and read it, one of the things that I love talking about with kids, when I talk about this book is, so here's a girl who was never good at swimming, doesn't really, the two things that she's quote unquote good at are reading and sort of being snarky. So, when she discovers this kind of amazing skill, it sort of opens up this whole new sense of herself. And, I feel like some kids know what they're good at. Some kids don't think they're good at anything. So sometimes it's good, like a fun activity, I guess, that goes along with reading this book can be talking to kids about, okay, so what's something you're kind of good at? Maybe it's, touching your tongue to your nose, or maybe it's just being a good friend. And then having them think about, okay, so how could I turn that into a superpower? How could just being a good friend become like a superpower? Or it's sort of a way in for kids to start to kind of be kind of just empowered in a way that isn't direct, you're not good at math, but, maybe you're good at drawing pictures. How could you turn that into something really kind of fantastical in a sense?
Wow, you bring up a great point. There are a lot of kids out there who, as you said, they know what their superpower is. It might be that they're great on the soccer field. They're a dancer. They're a singer. They're an actor. They're a baseball player. And a lot of those kids, they don't have perfect lives, but a lot of those kids just seem to be able to get through life and be happy and have a focus. And then there are a lot of kids who, as you said, they don't identify themselves as being good at anything. And, this would be a great time to just kind of sit down and talk about that and kind of help our kids discover what their superpower is.
Yeah. And just really taking really simple, small things that we overlook, loading the dishwasher, you're great at loading the dishwasher. That can be turned into something kind of really magical just in again, in these days of sort of quasi quarantine, just kind of beginning to kind of create with kids a way to, for those kids who aren't on the soccer team or dancing or any of that stuff, just, they're so overlooked and they feel so bad about themselves often.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a great exercise, and because most of the folks who are listening to this are parents or grandparents or a caregiver of some time, I think it's a great reminder to us not to overlook those kids and to intentionally look at those kids in a different way and to make sure that we make the effort and spend the time acknowledging what it is that we're proud of those kids for, because it's easy. We take our dancers to dance practice, and we go to the recitals, and we help them with their costumes, and we're investing in shoes. So it's like, yeah, we're very conscious of how great the dancer or the soccer player or the baseball player is. Yeah, we have to really kind of make sure we make the effort to notice the other kids and to notice the great things that those kids are doing too.
Yeah. And being playful with it too. So it's not even just sort of, kind of, so that the kids aren't like rolling their eyes like, oh yeah, you're just trying to make me feel better, like having some fun with them around it so that it becomes, more than just words.
Right. Yeah. You don't want your kids sitting there going, okay, Dad, you just read a parenting book. Okay. All right. I'll wait till you get over this.
Right. Exactly.
What inspired you? What was it that sparked your imagination that helped you create Grace?
Well, when I was a little girl, I was kind of obsessed with being a mermaid. So I used to really do this. I used to peel the labels off of the chicken of the sea tuna fish cans and save the pictures of that, blonde kind of pretty little mermaid. And I had a stack of my mom had a bunch of tuna fish cans without labels on them because I had all the labels. And I also used to do this thing where I would scrunch both my legs into one side of my pajamas and sort of shuffle around the house because how mermaid tails sort of look like, and I would pretend that I was a mermaid. And I think, so those were two things that it inspired this book. Also, I've always been very water, focused on I've been drawn to the ocean my whole life. I come from a family of water people. My father was in the Merchant Marines, and every vacation we might take was always, at a beach, or, we had a funky old motorboat we used to putt around in Long Island Sound. And, I swam at an early age, and, just sort of kind of being by the ocean is my happy place. So those were really the beginnings of it started a long time ago.
Well, it's interesting, and I can relate to a lot of that growing up in Boston. I've always, swim in the nasty Boston Harbor and all of that stuff. So, I'm very comfortable with the ocean, and it surprised me as I was growing up and got older and started meeting people from different parts of the country. It surprised me when I met someone who was looking, was a teenager who was looking at the ocean for the first time in their life. And so I'm wondering, I'm curious, I get, your fascination with mermaids, but what about this spark for Grace and taking this person who grew up in Ohio, and I've been to Ohio, and there's definitely no oceans in Ohio, and transporting them to the West Coast?
Well, I thought, I think when I had the first ideas for this book so long ago. This has been a project that has been percolating and in various sort of forms for over 10 years. So I think my first inspiration was, I'm always drawn to the misfit. I'm always drawn to the loner. I'm always drawn to the kid who sort of doesn't fit in my writing. And I thought, I knew I wanted to write about a mermaid, but I didn't want to write about a kid who, was, a mermaid to begin with. So I thought, what's the furthest place you could live from the source of what you might become? And so that's how I came up with the idea of her living in the Midwest. And there are things that get revealed throughout the book about how this might have happened to her. There's also, so part of it was, yes, my draw towards the misfit and this young person finding something really special about themselves. And I also have to say that the town that the book takes place in is a fictionalized version of a town in Southern California. And I have spent a lot of time in La Jolla, California, and Encinitas, California, because my husband's family all live out there. So I knew I wanted to kind of base the book in that kind of area. So I had a lot of sort of real life experience with sort of the place I wanted to put the book, but I did want to kind of fictionalize it and make it kind of not a real place. So those were two things that sort of like joined together in my thinking when I first started creating the ideas for the book.
You didn't want to transport Grace to Long Island Sound.
I had thought about that. And to be honest, I actually had sort of outlined a bunch of other books that are potential for the series. And one of them is tentatively titled Atlantic Grace. So she does have in a very badly written outline form, a story that does take her to the colder, less inviting waters of the, Atlantic, Long Island Sound area.
As you were describing how you were inspired to write this novel and how the story kind of came together, I was thinking, what a fun conversation it might be for families as they're reading Grace together to kind of sit down and ask kids and also for parents to think about what would be the place that they would be most uncomfortable in. Here's Grace that taken from the Midwest and put into the ocean, and wow, she's really a fish out of water, but she's in water. You know what I mean? But what is it that would challenge us the most? And I'm imagining that'd be an interesting conversation to have.
I love that idea. And almost in some ways it would be great. It's almost like a psychotherapeutic exercise too. You think about what's your biggest fear, and putting yourself in that fear and seeing how you master it or creating, again, a superpower that kind of gets you through that place, and then you kind of form a good association with it. Mm-hmm. For me, it would be, I hate being cold, so I could imagine being oh, you put me on top of a mountain, with blizzards and, kind of stuff like that. I mean, I know some people love skiing, and the idea to me of being cold and doing anything outdoorsy with snow is sort of so not cool.
I can relate to you, and it's really weird too, because I used to love the winter. I would love skiing and doing all that kind of winter stuff. And then I got married, and my wife and I had our honeymoon in Puerto Rico, and I'm like, it's winter at home, but I'm in 80-degree weather and I'm on the beach. I kind of dig this. And we came home and we were supposed to go skiing, and we got to the mountain, and I said, yeah, I don't dig this anymore. I want to go back to the beach.
Right. Yeah.
Why did you choose to write this for a middle grade audience? And who's responding to the tantalizing tales of Grace Minnaugh? Is it just middle school kids?
No, it's interesting you bring that up, because that's something I actually am really interested in. I feel like I love the middle grade. So I love that middle grade fiction is something that younger kids who actually maybe have really great reading comprehension skills could read on their own, and not be a book that their parents are going to be worried that they're reading for content purposes. There's kind of a, it's not too racy, it's not too disturbing, it's not too whatever. At least Grace isn't. I mean, there's nothing in Grace that's gonna scare anybody off. Mm-hmm. And I love that those kind of kids are look at me, I'm reading this book all by myself. How cool am I? And then the actual kids who are in middle grades are reading about a kid who's their age, and she's in 6th grade, and usually kids who are younger like reading about kids who are older than them. Yeah. So, 4th, 5th graders love reading about kids who are in 6th grade, and they can relate to some of the issues that she's going through in terms of socializing and the beginning of sort of the super cliques forming and that sort of stuff. And then I also feel like for older readers, for, grown, YA readers and grown-ups who like to read, there's enough content and interest that, it has a certain complexity of issues that make it interesting to read without the snark and edge of, say, a YA book or an adult literary fiction book. So I really love that it's right there in the middle. And I think the challenge of writing, so for readers, that's why I think it's great and juicy, a juicy kind of area of literature. And, for me as an author, getting the authentic voice and broad appeal of middle grade is probably the biggest challenge and the biggest reward. So far I feel like, the book isn't out yet, but it comes out for public consumption on April 4th. So everyone can go pre-order it if they want. But the people that have read it, there are plenty of people who I've given copies to, of all ages who love it. So that to me is the best. So. That's
awesome. Now, I love middle grades too, and it's a fun genre, and like you said, you can sit down. You don't have to typically worry about content. You're absolutely right. Those younger kids, they look up to the older kids. One of the phenomena that I've noticed, it doesn't matter where If you visit a school that's a K through 6 school, the 6th graders are the king of the hill, and everybody looks up to them, and the 6th graders have an attitude. If it's a K to 8 school, and the 6th graders don't really count that much, and it's the 8th graders, and it's a fascinating phenomenon. And I can imagine reading this. This would be a really great book to read with our younger kids, because like you said, it's like they're not dealing with a lot of those, tween issues, those early teen issues yet, but this is a great way to help them be prepared for it. Yeah. And, there's a mean girl in the book, and, so there's all that kind of stuff that happens again, and when kids shift from sort of being like, yeah, come play our imaginary game with us, and yeah, sure, you can be the unicorn if you want. It becomes more like, oh, you're not wearing the cool, you're wearing weird shoes. Right. You can't sit with us at lunch while we, do our thing. There is a little bit of that. It's not the main focus of the book, but it does have a big, social issues do play a role in the book. But not in a way that's sort of off-putting for little kids, Yeah. Well, let us know where we can go to find out more about you, find out more about the Tantalizing Tale of Grace Minnaugh and the other books that you've written.
Well, you can go to my website, which I desperately need to update, but all the books I've written have their own pages there. I've written, I do have a young adult novel that came out in 2018. And it's called Wave House. You can read about Wave House on my website. And also I have a short story collection that's definitely for grown-ups only, which came out about 4 years ago, called Staggerwing. And my website is my name, alcekaltman.com. That's ALICEKALTMAN.com. And the book is available. My books are available through their publishers. They're also available on Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com or IndieBound. And you can order them at any of your local bookstores, which is a kind of a great thing to do right now, because bookstores are really suffering because people can't kind of go into bookstores, but a lot of them are taking orders over the phone or online, and they'll let you know when the book comes in, and you can take your socially distant walk to the bookstore and pick it up. So that's how you can get the book. I'm also on, Facebook and Twitter and a little bit of Instagram. I'm not a great photograph taker, so I don't do much on Instagram, but, I definitely am on Facebook and Twitter more than I should be.
Well, we've had a great time speaking to the author of The Tantalizing Tale of Grace Minnaugh. It's a great middle grade read from our guest, Alce Kaltman. Alce, thanks so much for being part of the show.
Thanks for having me, Jed. It's been really fun talking to you.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Lauren Mossback. She'll be here to tell us about my sister's super skills. That is the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. If you are the author of a great children's book, we would love to have you as a guest on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of people about your fantastic children's book. All you need to do is to go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, click on the contact button at the bottom of the page. Let us know about your great book. We will let you know the next easy steps. I want to thank the people who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to thank our guest, Alce Kaltman. Be sure to check out the tantalizing tale of Grace Minnaugh. Also want to thank my incredible team, starting with my amazing producer, Fatima Khan, my awesome author, Ambassador Peggy Cotto, my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. I want to thank Augie the doggy for having my back here in the studio. But most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.